Most of us know the origin story of gravel. Born in the US, rapidly adopted by the rest of the world and embraced by nearly every single bike brand. It's really hot, really trendy right now. But is it a fad? Is it here to stay? Is gravel racing getting too serious? And how does the US gravel scene compare to the UK and the rest of the world? To find out, I sat down for a conversation with Ben Delaney, a journalist of over 20 years experience writing for some of the leading publications and based in Colorado and a regular at gravel events around the US. So, without further ado, let's dive in. So Ben, it's been a couple of weeks since Unbound. I'm sure you've managed to pull the last bits of mud out of your ears and drivetrain. Can you give us an idea of what that event was like and talk more generally about the event and its sort of impact and place in the US gravel scene?
Yeah, hey David, hey everybody. Yes, I was still just as of last night washing mud out of the cracks of the helmet where I thought I cleaned everything, but yeah, I'll be finding it for days and months to come. Unbound Gravel it's a thing for sure. It's a thing. Formerly Dirty Kansas, it is the biggest gravel race in the world, and for good reason. It's the 200 miler is the marquee event. Where we saw record times this year. But there's everything from a 25-mile gravel taster up to the XL, 350 miles of nonstop nonsense, fully unsupported. It's a test of stubbornness and how much your gut can handle eating at gas stations at 3 a.m. as much as it is
Yikes.
pedaling a bicycle.
So it sounds more, because from the UK, or from my point of view, we hear about the racing and the sprint finishes for the ex-pros and pro roadies.
Yes.
But it sounds from your description, it's more accessible. There's a shorter event and a longer event, so a bit of everything for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the gravel's roots were, largely in like an ultra endurance format, but very much from an every person, every man, every woman perspective. It was Unbound Gravel started with a couple dozen friends kind of daring each other, like, hey dude, what do you think we could do? That's crazy. Sort of like the start of Iron Man, that sort of, it's not like it began as a giant corporate athletic thing. It's not like the UCI gathered together and drew up plans. It was just friends. And the idea was just, can normal people go for an absurdly long time on rough surfaces on bicycles poorly designed for it? So sort of like long form cyclocross. But yeah, the roots and the bulk of the sport, if you want to call it a sport, it's always been about normal folks. And only recently has even the idea of a pro gravel racer become a thing.
It seems like gravel's got very serious and very fast very recently, and an influx of ex-pros and current pros. And it feels like gravel in the US, from my perspective, and you probably put me wrong here, it's about racing and winning. But is that the case?
As my wife has taught me to say, yes and, not yes but yes and. You can have multiple things existing simultaneously. And one analogy we often give for gravel racing is it's like a running event. Whether that's a marathon or a 5K or a 10K, often affectionately referred to as mullet racing or mullet events. Business at the front, party at the back. At the front, yes, there are skinny people who go very quickly and are there to win. And now we're seeing the large prize purses. Lifetime, which owns a number of gyms here in the U.S., it has put on a 6-event series called the Grand Prix, where there's $250,000 up for grabs. So yeah, there's serious racing, which is cool. And just like at a 5K or a 10K or a marathon, if you're just a person trying to finish, like myself, when I do a running event, it's just, if I can get my carcass to the finish line, that's a success. It's still neat to see the world's best do it at that level at the same event. So you can, like here in Boulder, we've got the Boulder, which is a 10K race, and I'll do like a normal time, and then you go see what these elite athletes are doing. Like, what? How? What? Watching something on television, or even as a fan watching people go by, you get a sense of speed. But when you do a thing yourself, and then an elite athlete does that very same thing, it's real world context. So I think like all this exists at the same time, and I think Unbound is a great example of that. And we in the media are, you know, put most of the focus on the front of the race,
Yeah,
you know, because
definitely.
for a number of reasons. But it is a single digit percentage of the overall thing, and you know what sustains it as a business is normal folks who are saving up their money to come and do it as like a, you know, certainly like a once a year, maybe once in a lifetime thing. And I love the eclectic nature of people and, you know, body types and ages and bicycle configurations, you know, like lining up. Last year there was a rain delay, so we were all huddled. A lot of us were huddled under a church overhang, and there was like on one side of me was a dude in a skin suit and an arrow helmet, and you know, like in it to win it. And on another other side was a woman from Kansas who had on tennis shoes, you know, trainers as you call them,
Wow.
on a fat bike. And I was like, well, that's something. She's like, well, I'm going to be out there all day. I want to be comfortable. Like, you know, so I don't. To give you a long-winded answer to a short question, is gravel serious? Yes, and at some events at the front, um, but I still think the bulk of gravel is still a very healthy, participatory. Let's just see if we can do this um, type environment that is still so fundamentally different from road racing, which is, you know, like my past and I still love. But you know, in a road race, you're signed up and you're in different categories, right? So men are never going to race with women. I race old guys, so I'm never going to race with the young kids. You know, we're all segmented out, and the people in the front, you know, off the front are having one experience. The people in the pack are having another experience, and then the guy who just got dropped and is off the back wondering why he got up early to drive an hour to feel bad about himself is having a fundamentally different experience. In gravel, there's so many people. You're like at a big marathon. It's sure, like technically there will always be one person at the very back, but there's so many, such a long string of humanity. There's always, you know, you can people where you can get in where you fit in, and it's again, like with a running event, for most people just finishing it is the thing. So people who are there with you are buoying you along from both just like the physiological, like the draft perspective, but also like a mental perspective. Like you're all trying to finish. You're not yelling at each other about chopping wheels in the last corner of an office park criterium. So I'm a fan. I'm a fan.
It does sound like it.
Yeah.
It's a shame almost like the media do focus on the winners and not so much the many stories I imagine that happen way back in the middle of the pack or at the back of the pack, and some of the characters like the lady on the fat bike and their adventure and their experience from it. Some people talk about gravel spirit. I mean, what is that? And this is sort of serious racing focus. Is that harming the gravel spirit in the US?
Well, let us hold a seance now, David, and we can summon the spirit of gravel into the podcast and let it speak for itself as to what are you, spirit of gravel? Yeah, it's something we like to make fun of, and part of it comes from the roots of gravel, where it's just friends or acquaintances putting on an ad hoc event, and the idea was not to have a heavily regulated thing where you had to have a license and like all these different things. And so I think so. That's the spirit of gravel. It's like good natured competitions. Like if you're playing pickup basketball with your friends, like you don't need to have a referee. Like let's just not be jerk faces. Like that's what it's operating on. Where it gets tricky is when you have things like $250,000 up for grabs.
Okay.
And people are trying to win. And just like, you know, if you're playing a football match and there was no out of bound lines, you could, why not dribble the ball behind the goal and then come to the front of the goal and shoot it? You know, like there's right, the object's to score a goal. I scored a goal. There's no lines. How can you say I'm out of bounds when there are no boundary lines? So that's some of what gravel is struggling with. You know, like at Steamboat Gravel last year, Lauren DeCrescenzo, who's a phenomenally talented athlete, rides for Tom Dennison's Cinch team, was riding with some of her male teammates for part of the time, and she eventually dropped all of them. But there was like a bit of a thing where one teammate went ahead, got a water bottle for her, dropped back, and handed it to her, so she didn't have to stop at an aid station the way some of her other female competitors did.
Okay.
None of her female competitors argue that she was the strongest that day, but that was the thing where, like, well, she was doing something. She had a tactical move that was different than the others. There was nothing in the rule book about that, So that was kind of like a pivotal point for her. That's against the spirit of gravel. And Lauren being put in awkward positions, like, well, I was trying to win the bike race. I'm a bike racer, in any road race, like in any world tour race that you watch. If you have teammates and you don't use your teammates, you're being a knucklehead, So I'm a proponent for big races where there's money on the line, having some basic rules. Like I don't think that having rules is contrary to being a good person. It just helps establish, okay, what game are we playing here? Like, what's the size of the goals? Where are the outer bounds lines? And then, okay, let's play. Like,
they're running a bike race without rules is going to lead to problems that we see in like the tri bars, and they've been quite a sort of a sore spot for some people. And the Unbound rider for 201 with tri bars, and there's a bit of a social media storm, wasn't there? I think it was a few years ago with Ted King as well. So, but if there's no rules, then like I say, what's the problem?
That's irony. Is that often the people who are espousing the beauty of having no rules are often the most vocal about, well, you've got to follow the spirits. It's like, whoa, I thought it was about just being open and free. Well, it is, but according to my definition of what free is, and that's not it. So.
On the subject of rules, the UCI are obviously getting into gravel, the World Championships. How do you think that'll impact gravel as a category for racing, the spirit of gravel and all that?
Yeah, I think one key differentiator to keep in mind with UCI is between their elite level events, such as the World Tour and mountain bike and cyclocross, where you have to have a UCI license as a professional to participate. Teams have to be invited to World Tour level races, like it's pro class, and their participatory arms, such as the Gran Fondo World Series and Gran Fondo World Championships that they've been running for a number of years. Anybody can do the UCI Gran Fondo stuff, and at the same time, as a Gran Fondo promoter, you don't have to be part of the UCI to put on Gran Fondos. So I think there was a lot of concern initially when UCI announced the World Series that it was going to be, they're going to do to gravel what they did to mountain bike, which was make it all about chasing points to get into the Olympics. And that put a squeeze on event promoters and racers, and the UCI effectively took control of the sport of mountain biking. Could they do that in the future? If gravel is put into the Olympics, yes, but I don't see that happening, at least anytime soon. So now I think it's going to be a non-issue, and that like a few of the World Series events have already happened. Very few people have noticed or cared. And the few gravel pros as there are are doing other things. I asked a number of them when it was announced, are you going to chase these World Series races and do worlds? The date and place hadn't even been announced. And the response across the board from the Laurens and the Ted Kings and the Payson McIlvains and the Pete Stetnas is like, well, if one of the races fits my schedule, yeah, maybe, but I'm not going to change. I've already got my schedule set, and I've already got sponsor commitments or just friends who put on events that I like doing. Like, we're good. We've got our own program here. So I think the UCI World Series and World Championships will be an additive thing. I don't think it's in direct conflict. Also, I'd have to say that a lot of these pros who are poo-pooing the World Championships gravel I think a lot of them secretly want to win, because who doesn't want to have a rainbow jersey to
The
wear or
pinnacle of
hang in
every
the closet?
discipline, even gravel, like having a
Right?
rainbow jersey is going to be pretty cool,
Right?
wouldn't it? Until it
Yeah.
gets dirty. So away from racing, and given how many unpaved roads you have available to ride, in most of the country, can you give a sense how popular gravel bikes are? Are people like choosing gravel over road when they go out for a Sunday ride, or when they buy a new bike? Are people riding gravel bikes promptly these days?
Gravel bikes, yeah, it's gravel bikes and e-bikes, as you know, are like the hot categories uh, globally, and certainly in the U.S. Um, regionally, it's a big determinant as to how many people are buying gravel versus road bikes. Roads not dead.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, I guess the answer there with so much cycling is, yeah, it depends. Um, but I think most bike shops will tell you, and most bike brands still in the US will tell you that, yeah, gravel bikes are, that's the hot thing right now. If you can get them if you can get them from suppliers, from factories, from shops, those are selling like hotcakes right now. Yeah.
But you don't think gravel is going to kill road cycling or road racing or road events in the US anytime soon?
I don't think it's going to kill road racing or events, um, or certainly like road riding. But like the denser our cities get, the more difficult it is to put on events. So, for example, here in Boulder, which is not a huge town, but there's almost zero road cycling events here, just because permitting is an issue. Um, but if you go like one county over to where it's farm roads, it's just a much easier thing for organizers to just host events, to hold events. Um, Never mind the fact that it just seems less stressful for many people to ride on a dirt road where there are no cars versus riding on a paved road with 18 wheelers brushing your elbow at 60 miles an hour.
Blimey. And another difference, well, you can probably expand it. Here in the UK, gravel is less about racing. We don't really have the space or the wide open tracks to go racing, and there's like access laws and stuff. So gravel bikes become popular for people seeking that escape and freedom, and bike
Yes.
packing particularly, and doing their own adventures. There are less
Yes.
events. There are events, but there's less events and more doing their own adventures. Is that the same in the US? It sounds more like it's all about doing the gravel events rather than doing your own sort of 3-day bike packing adventures or just riding to get lost in the wilderness.
Yes, I think I don't even know how many hundreds of gravel events there are in the U.S. now. Um, I think the attraction of having something on your calendar to look forward to and rally with your
Okay.
friends, and it's like it's a thing, it's an event, it's built in. You show up and there's a bunch of people there. Um, for instance, this weekend I'm going to Nebraska for the Robidoux Rendezvous, where there is at least 4, if not 5, shakeout rides the day before. So there's the race on Saturday, but people are coming in, Thursday night to do social rides on Friday.
Oh wow.
It's
Okay.
because there's like the rides are a thing, and it was the same at Unbound. There was probably a dozen of these like mass rides
No way.
that aren't competitive at all. The idea is just to like go out and meet people and ostensibly make sure nothing's going to fall off your bike for race day. Um, but yeah, the community aspect of events is a huge draw. Um, Plus, I think it's a little less intimidating. I mean, it certainly is for me, than the idea of, okay, pack up everything you'll need for 3 days and head off into the wilderness, hope you don't run into bears. Um, my buddy Betsy Welch likes to talk about how for people there are inside dogs and outside dogs. And inside dogs, of which I'm one, like to go out and play and do things outside, but then come back inside for creature comforts and sleep on a soft
I see.
bed. And where she categorizes herself as an outside dog, where she'll do a multi-day tour of Hawaii with just like a little sack strapped under her handlebars, and she's like, yeah, just go off and sleep under a tree somewhere.
Yeah,
I
I'm
think there
definitely
are
a former.
I think there are fewer outside dogs among us, at least in the U.S. We're soft over here.
I was going to ask a question later. Maybe ask now, like what is gravel? Is a one clear definition, because I get that all the time. Like, what is gravel? Like,
Yeah, that's a good one. You've put me on the spot. I don't have a concise thing. Yeah, short of going all UCI on it with calipers on the tires. Yes, it's just riding dirt roads, riding road bikes with big fat tires.
with no rules.
Yeah, but sometimes enforceable spirit.
Forcible spirit.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that. So, man, you've ridden loads of gravel around the US. Where's the best gravel? If I was coming over to the US to ride the best gravel in the US, where do I get the best experience? Event or just dirt roads?
Well, I'm biased in all things, and particularly location. I've been in Colorado for 17 years, and it's some of the best riding in the world. Um, to bag on our neighbor Kansas a bit, I love going out there for the events, but it's I would not move to Kansas.
Okay.
In that, so here in the front range of the Rocky Mountains, we've got flat dirt roads, rolling dirt roads for days, and then we're like at the foothills of the mountains, so you can climb up um, to 3,000 meters from where we are, and a lot of that is on dirt roads, and that's for me just a joy of living here is getting lost on dirt canyon roads. And yeah, there are events that go along with that, but as far as like a daily experience, just having the variety of flat and rolling and plains and mountains, um, that I think is a treat. I'm sure like whoever is listening to this in different parts of the world, different parts of the country, that's wrong. Like where I live is the best gravel in the world.
Absolutely.
Like East Coasters here, like in Vermont or something, that's just like a whole other level of foliage and humidity and that we don't have here in the arid high desert.
Okay.
Yes,
Now,
Colorado, pretty cool.
Colorado, I like it.
Good for bikes.
Good for cycling. And so you've been a tech journo for a few years, I think fair to say. I'm going to talk a bit about bikes and tech stuff. But first question, like when somebody says to you a gravel bike is just a 90s mountain bike, sort of Reborn, how do you answer that? What do you make of people sort of how cynical people are to gravel bikes just being a sort of a rebadged, remarketed 90s mountain bike?
Well, yeah. Oh, yeah. Gravel bikes, like everything that humanity does, is just like iterative, right? It's not like gravel bikes for this brand new, never before conceived thing with no trace to a past. That doesn't mean that they're identical to something from 40 years ago. And I bet the easiest answer to that would be to hand someone a 30-pound 80s mountain bike and a 16-pound 2022 model gravel bike. Okay, which one do you want to ride? Yeah, there's some similarities, and 1 year to the next, or the 2021 model to the 2022 model, there's not usually huge jumps, but over 4 decades, yeah, there has been quite a bit of progress.
Just
so, yes. So short answer, yes, they're wrong.
Right answer. I bought an old 90s mountain bike during the first lockdown. Did a bit of gravel versus 90s mountain bike, and there's some huge differences when you ride an old mountain bike compared to a modern gravel bike. I mean,
so what stuck out for you as
the weight for a start? I mean, the old bike was really heavy. The brakes were rubbish. The gears rubbish. The geometry wasn't hugely different. But yeah, it's just all technology. Technology in the 90s is pretty ropey, isn't it, really? And compared to what we have now, lightweight, carbon frames, alloy frames, hydraulic disc brakes, wires gears, electronic gears, everything works. You stop when you want to stop rather than tomorrow when you pull the brake lever. And the tyre technology as well. I mean, the tyres actually the tyre width is almost the same, 1.9, 2 inch. And it also shows how better mountain bikes are compared to what they were 40 years ago as well. So,
oh, for sure.
But yeah, I mean, I'm thankful for the innovation we've had over the last 20, 30, 40 years. We're not riding our bikes from the 90s anymore, because I don't think I'd still be cycling if I had a bike from the 90s today.
Yeah, I was coming down a hill here with my buddy Dave, who's on rim brakes. This hill called Magnolia, which is super steep and terrible to go up, but a hoot to come down. And we got to the bottom, and we pulled over, and he stopped for a while. And he's like pumping his hands to get feeling back into his fingers. He's like, my hands were locking up from like having to grip the brakes for, it's like a 18-mile descent with often over double digits and lots of steep switchbacks. So like you're on the brakes a lot. And so I've just been using one index fingers on the disc brakes. I didn't think anything of it. So that was just like a pretty good example of big leap.
18-mile descent, you say?
Oh, yeah.
18 miles?
18.
18? That's insane.
Yeah.
Just descending for 18 miles. Oh, my God. That's like...
It's big mountains.
Yeah. Ours are like very steep, but very short. It's like 30 seconds, just like that steep. And then stop at T-junction at the bottom.
Yeah, I've argued with this with Guy Kestevan for quite a bit about gear range, and I am a fan of 2x for gravel bikes instead of 1x. I mean, now with Eagle is with a 10 to 50 cassette, that's pretty good range. But initially, like 1x, I'm like, well, you just don't have enough rope. You've got to sacrifice either climbing or descending and have enough gears. And like when you're riding in the mountains, like I want to have both. And he's like, there, you said it. I'm like, I said what? He's like, mountains. Like most of us aren't riding in the mountains. We don't need that. If you are having wide range gearing, that's something you look back at a mountain bike from the 80s of a triple ring. But besides the weight, like that's not an optimum experience in my humble opinion.
It's a lot of shifting. So on that note, what are kind of popular tech trends in the gravel market in the US for you, or locally from the ride you see? Is it 2x, 1x, sort of tire width?
1x.
Oh, really?
Yeah. 1x40 is the new standard.
On a 700C wheel?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, 650 is not a thing at all.
Do you think that's gone away then? I was wondering about this the other day. Like a few years ago, everyone was talking about it being like the next big thing, but now it doesn't seem to be manufacturers aren't speccing it so much. And
I'm not seeing it. No, I think it was just it's just too much rubber, and that's something. Some things we can't feel, and we'll tell ourselves on group rides or on chat rooms. We'll lecture each other about the minutia of things that we, if given the Pepsi challenge, if given a blind test, could not discern.
Okay.
But rotational weight, we can. I think normal people, if you go from you go from your road bike to a mountain bike, you can feel the difference in all the weight of the rubber. When you just start to accelerate away from the stop sign or at the bottom of the hill, whatever, you can feel that. So, 650, you can put a big fat tire on there, which is good for suspension, and that feels nice. You can definitely feel the comfort, but you also feel like you're lugging around a lot of rubber. So, 700C 40 mil tire. I think that's the sweet spot for most of us.
And what's your view on suspension? We're seeing suspension forks, seat posts have a sort of quite creative solution. Do you think that's a step too far? Take it too close to a mountain bike, or do you think it's just enough?
I don't know about step too far. Like, if my take is like whatever you like to ride, have at it. I don't think there's too far, like too middling to, like, if it works for you, go for it. For me, I feel like the gravel suspension often the juice isn't worth the squeeze. There's too much weight or complexity without enough benefit. Like if you're riding a suspension mountain bike, like that is a plush thing. You can charge over baby head rock fields and just float through it. But like, to pick on BMC, for instance, they've got the LT, the ERS LT, long travel, 20 ferocious millimeters of travel, of which 5 is sag. So you've got 1.5 centimeters of travel. Like that's not really doing a whole lot.
No.
And I think people get it in their heads like, well, now I've got a full suspension thing. Now I can ride it like a 140 mil mountain bike. At the BMC launch, we must have had 15 flats in one ride because there was a lot of mountain bike mountain bike journalists were like, "Yeah, we're on a full suspension bike. Let's send it."
So,
And it was just flatting left and right. Um, that said, a little bit. I think this for me, the sweet spot is a long carbon fiber post with some give to it, where there's not. It's not a mechanical thing. There's not certainly not a hydraulic suspension thing. I don't go in for dropper post because that compromises the softening ride of a carbon post.
yeah,
But I think that works well. Like at Unbound Gravel, I took the giant Revolt. It's got a long seat post, and like that feels good.
Yeah.
And feels noticeably different than like say a rigid, stiff aero bike of yore, when you could ride over different coins and discern just by the vibration in your spine what you were hitting. And then like the specialized diverge, like with the feature shock, that feels pretty good. And I like the fact that there's a lockout. When it's something bigger, like Easton or Fox or RockShox have suspension forks, but are still low travel. Yes, that's smoother for sure. And when you're in the saddle, that's smoother. But standing up and turning it, there's just more weight on the front end, and for me, I don't feel that is worth it.
One of the things I've always liked about gravel, and it's why I used to ride cross bike back in the day, is like that sort of being underbiked. Like, it's not the perfect bike for the riding, and it's sort of require a bit more riding skill. And because bikes have got so good, whether road bikes or mountain bikes, and like mountain bikes especially, you can ride down stuff and not even notice what you're riding over.
Sure.
Which is great. But the speed you have to go to get that sense of that thrill is pretty scary. The consequences of crash. But the gravel bike, you don't go very far, and you're like, oh my god, it's terrifying. You're doing like 10 miles an hour down a bumpy trail. I like the benefits of suspension. I rode that RockShox 4 and I was really impressed with it. But then it's like, yes, it makes it faster and smoother, but then is it getting away from that idea of being on the bike to not being on the perfect bike, which I sort of like the simplicity of a bike.
Yes.
Just you have to sort of compensate for the lack of technology.
Yes.
Like bending your arms and whatever else you're doing.
Yes. I remember the first time I went to Whistler was Shimano was launching their Saint group, which was a downhill group, and I was way out of my element. But as you said, like the bikes are so good. You don't have to pick a line. I just would close my eyes and follow people. And you get in way over your head, way too quickly because the bike can so good. And conversely, if you were riding that on a rigid bike, you'd have to pick lines and build your skills to get down in one piece. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, there's something to that. And another piece is just like the weight weanieism of it. Of if you're trying to go faster than you did yesterday or last week, adding weight to your bike kind of feels like you're going the wrong direction.
So gravel is clearly hugely popular, but do you think it's a fad, or is it going to be here in the next 5-10 years? And if it is going to be here in the next 5-10 years, where do you see it evolving to from where it is now?
I think it's not a fad. I mean, it's trendy now for sure. Like anything that humans do, we kind of follow each other around like lemmings. I do believe it'll be here in 10 years, and I think it will kind of break into a couple of niches the way mountain biking has. Like in the beginning, when Goddess created mountain biking, like there was just mountain bike. There weren't, wasn't enduro and downhill and cross country and down country and all these different things. It's just one thing. And now we're already seeing people talk about fast gravel versus a more like bike packy gravel. So I think we'll see brands commit to that a bit. Right now, brands they're in business for business. They want to sell as much stuff as possible. And we're seeing there's like two ways to do that with bikes. One is, okay, we're going to have a packing bike over here. And then on the far other end, we'll have a completely different super light racy aero gravel race bike. That's one approach. And another approach is to have one bike that can supposedly do all the things, but none of them really well. Like, okay, well, if you want to have long travel, you can disassemble your rear end and have this super long travel, super wide tire bike, or you can spend a bunch of time reconfiguring it and engineering your bike, and it's a race bike, and there's bolts you can use, you don't have to use, whatever. I think more brands will commit to that. Okay, this is our gravel race bike. So segmentation is, I guess, what I'm trying to get at in a long-winded way.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like sort of fast gravel on one side, and eventually bike packing, fat tire, almost mountain bikes on one end, and then a few in between.
Yeah,
more choice for the way people are riding these bikes in different ways, and we're racing or doing epic adventures. So, sound good. Finally, last question: you're going for a ride today, this afternoon. What bike are you grabbing, and why?
Sure. This afternoon, I'm going to ride. There's a there's a group right here in Boulder called Fast Gravel. Like that's the name of the thing. Where when you're on the dirt segments, that's like the game on, and everybody's racing it, and then you get on the pavement, and then that's a regroup section. So I love that.
Okay.
The bike I am choosing today, David, is the Checkpoint, which I just put aero bars on yesterday.
Aero bars.
Yeah, man.
We can stop now if you want.
because can't you just accept me for who I am?
The spirit of gravel. Anyway, current story.
So wind is a thing here. Like this weekend, as I said, I'm going to Nebraska for this race. I was using I'm going to give you a fully dorky answer here. One of my favorite apps is called Epic Ride Weather. I don't know if you've seen this.
Oh no!
You got to check this out, man. David Green started this as just a pet project to see what the weather would be on his commute, and developed it so well that Jumbo Visma has been using it for years for racing. And that you put your route in, Strava, ride with GPS, whatever, just auto loads. Select the date, time, and your average speed, and then it spits out a weather forecast for the route at each point on the thing. It's handy to see temperature, in real time all the way around. But the cool part is the wind direction and speed shown graphically with arrows. So like the bigger the arrows, the stronger the wind. So you can just at a glance see like, okay, we're going to be first half screaming tailwind, latter half just crawling into a headwind. So it's going to be windy this weekend. Physics is a thing. So I want to have air bars, and I want to make sure they're not going to slip or whatever, so I'm dialing my stuff in.
Well, I'm sure the gravel gods be stroking the chins at this use of technology to get an advantage in the wind. But
yeah. But then on tomorrow, there's a number of different shakeout rides, and one group's putting on a ride where it's a t-shirt ride. You got to the whole thing show up in t-shirts, like t-shirts. Stop taking yourself so dang seriously, you nerds in your skin suits and aero bars. Just come ride a bike like a normal person. So
yeah, we didn't even get into fashion, did we? T-shirts versus skin suits and
jorts and mustaches, and that'll have to be a whole separate
episode 2.
Yeah.
Fantastic, Ben. Well, thanks for your time. Love to learn about gravel from a US perspective, and we'll enjoy your ride this afternoon and the race at the weekend, and catch up with you soon, hopefully.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, David. Good to chat with you.
That, I think you'll agree, was an interesting and insightful conversation around the US gravel scene and some of the peculiar details of it and how it compares to the rest of the world. If you want to find out more about gravel, then check the playlist right here. Don't forget to subscribe to Just Ride Bikes by hitting the button just here, and you check out Ben's new channel by clicking the button right here. But that's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you all again very soon.